Good morning, everybody. Good morning. We are Haltman in Daf Kuf Amud Aleph in Metzia. Metzia Daf Kuf Amud Aleph. Hashem should give us Yata Dishmaya to learn, understand, Lilmoid, Ulalamed, Lishma Vlasus Ulakayim. May we be zdochet to understand the Heilige words of the Gemara. Welcome to everybody here now, Shalom Beit Shemesh. Welcome to everybody in our YouTube channel, Torah Anytime, and Kol Halashon. Basically, we are learning the famous Mishnah Daf Kuf Amud Aleph from Machlif Poro v'Chamor. Right now, we are in the middle of the page. The line starts with the word the oimer, or actually, line starts with Shaloi Mocharti, and the last word in the line is Tnan. More or less middle of the page, Shaloi Mocharti, and one word below that is Ze oimer Eini Yodea. Let us revise what we saw in the Mishnah. We saw in the Mishnah that in the case of dispute between a buyer and a seller regarding, there was a shivcha or a poro, they were sold and they were pregnant. And the question is, does the baby that was born, does it belong to the seller or the buyer? Because the question is, was it born before or after the transaction, before or after the kinyan? So the question is, the nafkamina is, who is the owner? And we said in the Mishnah, Yachloiku, that was the Reisha. Who believes in Yachloiku as opposed to Amoitzim Chaver Lovaraya? Why don't we say the famous concept of Amoitzim Chaveroi, we say Echloiku? Because you know what? The author of this Mishnah is Sumchus. Sumchus is the master of not believing so much in Amoitzim Chaveroi, but rather in Echloiku, split it up. But then we had the Machlokes in the Amoraim, Amoraim, on how far does Sumchus go with preferring splitting over chazaka of Amoitzim Chaveroi. What was the machlokes? We said machlokes Rabba bar Avuna and Rove. Rabba bar Avuna said that Sumchus always applies his rule, even in Bori v'Bori. Even if the person holding the item in his hands, or Cheskas Morakama, historically he's the one who used to own it, even then Sumchus says, Yachloiku. I simply don't believe in Amoitzim Chaveroi, I always believe in splitting. That's how Rabba bar Avuna explained Sumchus. Rave sort of limited the words of Sumchus and says, no, Sumchus only by Shema v'Shema, only when both sides are Shema, including the holder, the Machzik, he thinks it's a Shema, he himself isn't sure of what's going on, then his Chazaka is not worth much. That's what we say. Mashenkin, in Bori v'Bori, even Sumchus would agree that Amotzim Chaver Lo Varaya. So now, how do you learn the first part of the Mishnah? The first part of the Mishnah has now two different ways of reading it. The first part of the Mishnah has two different voices. According to Rabba bar Avuna, we're talking in Bori v'Bori, which means each one stands there clearly, assertively, and says, certainly, I know that the baby belongs to me. The other one says, no, it belongs to me. According to Rove, no. The Reisha only spoke in Shema. When both sides say, as we say, maybe yes, maybe no, maybe it belongs to me. The other one says maybe it belongs to me, and that was the case. That's how we qualify the case of the Reisha of a Machlif Poro b'Chamor. Okay, now let's see how the Mishnah. Let's keep reading the Mishnah, says the Gemara, and see which one's right, Rabba bar Avuna or Rove. Now, let's see what the Mishnah says. At the very, very end of the Mishnah, we had a different case. And it says, I'm reading from the Gemara now. Ze omer ein yodea, ze omer ein yodea, yachloiku. What was the case of ze omer ein yodea? Each one says, I don't know. The other one says, I don't know either. There was a case in which, there was a person who sold his friend one piece of land, or one eved. The person has two pieces of land, one big and one small, or two avadim, one big, one small, right? And then what do we say? We say, each one argues. The buyer says, I got the big one, or I deserve the big one. The big one was spoken about. The seller says, no, we spoke about the small one. If both sides are uncertain, there were four different variations. If you remember, the fourth variation, the fourth case is what? Both sides say, maybe. And what do we say? Yachloiku, did they split? So that's okay, because the Mishnah follows Sumchus. However, let's see how the Seifa and the Reisha work together. Bishlam al I can understand Rava. Rava works right here with the Seifa Shema v'Shema, Reisha nami Shema v'Shema, which means just like the Seifa clearly talks about Shema v'Shema. In the Sefer it says outright, black and white. Both sides say Eini Yodea. And in the case of Shema v'Shema, that teaches you, that reflects upon the Reisha, because the Reisha it's not clear, right? In the Reisha it's not clear if it's a maybe or a Shema. The fact that the Sefer tells you Shema shows you, this is a Shema v'Shema Mishnah. It's not called being repetitive. It's called speaking it out, or that's how we say it in Yeshivish language, yeah? In other words, the Sefer that told you that we talk about two maybes shows you, reflects upon the Reisha, there too it's Shema v'Shema. But according to Rabbi Baravuna, who's now under attack, the Omar Ein In, almost Sumchus Ofilu Bori Bori. Rabbi Baravuna said that Sumchus said the concept of what? The concept of Yachloiku, even if both sides, including the Machzik is Bori, and still we say you split it. I don't care at all about Chazaka, even in Bori. If so, Ashta Bori Bori Omer Yachloiku Shema v'Shema miboya. If in the Reisha, and according to the truth, Aliba de Emes, Sumchus says, even in the case of Bori, the guy knows for sure it's mine, and he's holding it, and we still say Yachloiku. So why do you have to talk in the Sefer about Shema, right? Why is it in the Sefer, in the very, very end of the Mishnah, about the big field and the small field? Why are you talking here about a case of Shema v'Shema? Why don't you show your true colors? Yeah, tell me the bigger chidush. Yeah, answers the Gemara. Lo iria. No. That doesn't mean anything at all. No. On the contrary, says Rabbi Baravuna. If that's what's bothering you, lo iria doesn't mean anything. Tana seifa legiluye reisha. The seifa, in a way different to Rabba, reflects on the reisha. In which way? Shelot toima reisha shema v'shema. Aval bori ubori loy, which means we all agree that the Reisha is unclear. Reisha is unclear if it's avada, if it's bori or shema. Comes the Mishnah in the Sefer and tells you black and white with real colors. It's telling me that the Sefer is shema to reflect on the Reisha. And again, I'm reading Shelot Toma Reisha Shema v'Shema. If I would have just read the Reisha without the Sefer, I wouldn't be clear. I would have thought maybe the Reisha is talking about Shema. I would play it safe and say, when do you say Achloiku? You don't believe in Metzia Mechavel Avaraya? Don't you know what we all learn in Kita Dalet? Metzia Mechavel Avaraya? Shema v'Shema I can accept. Aval Bori Loi. To tell me Bori, maybe I would have said no. If the Muchzak is clearly holding the item, screaming out loud, saying it's definitely mine, then I would have said maybe Sumchus didn't say what he said. Therefore, Tana Seifa Shema v'Shema Michla Dereisho Bori Vafilachi Achloiku. Let me explain. The Seifa in the direct contradiction to Rove, he says no. The Seifa Davka spoke about Shema v'Shema not to reflect that the Reisha is also Shema v'Shema. Says Rashi, why do you need two Shema v'Shema? It's repetitive. On the contrary, the Seifa said Shema v'Shema to tell me that the Reisha must be talking about something different. Every part of the Mishnah should give me new chidushim. Yeah, ever seen, new features every day? Yeah, the Mishnah has different parts. Each part is new. So the Sefer Davka spoke to me about Shema in order to reflect that the Reisha is telling me Bori. Even though it's Bori and then the Chazoko seems to be strong, ironclad, we're still saying Achloiku in Sumchus. It's very, very simple. Machlokes Yerov and Rabbi Baravuna. Really, when we sum it up, it's very clear. Both parties have to admit that the Seifa spoke about what? Shema v'Shema. That's black and white. The Reisha is a question mark. Ever done math? Yeah, there's a variable, unknown variable. It's called Ne'elam in Hebrew. Oh, yeah, the X, right, in the formula. That's what's going on here. How do we know the X? Through the other numbers, right? That's what's going on here. The Reisha, we're not clear if it's Bori or a Shema. Says Rove, of course it's a Shema. The Sefer that spoke about Shema reflects and shows me that this Mishnah in general is a Shema-style Mishnah. You know what I'm saying? The Mishnah in general speaks about Shema, but Bori, no. In Bori, Sumchus didn't dare that much to say that in Bori, they split. Rabbi Baravuna says the other way around. No, I don't have to tell me the same thing twice. No, if the Sefer said Shema, must be the Reisha is talking about Bori. And even in Bori, even then said Sumchus Echloiku. Very good. So the part that we do know, Lekula Alma, reflects on the part that we don't know, which is the Reisha, which is Sumchus's big moment. Let's go with the question. When the Sefer says Shema, does it show me that the Reisha is also Shema? And it's all one big, happy, homogeneous, consistent Mishnah of Shema. That's Rove. Rabbi Baravuna says, no, the other way around. The Sefer tells me Shema, in order to show that the variable, the X in the formula, is Bori, because we don't have to repeat the same thing twice. Of course, they're both right. Yeah, it's a question of how do you analyze the Mishnah stylistically. That's a question between Rabba and Rove, and Rabbi Baravuna. Very good. So now, now let's continue. Yeah. No, that's not. No, obviously, yeah. Shema, that's not a repetition. Shema v'Shema means Reuven says Shema and Shimon says Shema. Repetitive, I mean the Mishnah says it twice. The Mishnah speaks about two cases. According to Rava, the Mishnah spoke about two cases in which both sides are Shema v'Shema. The Reisha is about the exchange, the Shifcha or Poro, where was the baby born, and the Seifa is about two fields that were sold. Actually, one field was sold. Which one, right? There are two cases of Shema v'Shema according to Rava. Let's see more. Now we're going again to attack the opinion of Rabbi Bar Rav Huna. Tnan. From the Mishnah. We're still reading the Mishnah, trying to figure out who's right, Rove or Rabbi Bar Rav Huna. Tnan. Zoimer Godol v'Zoimer Koton. Now that was the second to last case in the Mishnah, where both sides are certain. One of them says Godol, the other one says Koton. Meaning what? You sold me a field? That's the field? That tiny thing? No. We spoke about a big field, and money wasn't yet discussed. Yeah, there was something else, star maybe. Yeah, that's no, what pitom. And the other says, no way. 1,000,000%, 100%. We spoke about the small field. Both sides, loggerheads, they know what they're talking about, so they claim. Bori v'bori. And what do we say? Yishova hamoicher shekotan mochar. So now, in case that the one that is being sued, so to speak, in this case the seller, right? Who's taking who to court? The buyer takes the seller to court. The buyer says, I bought a big one. Even this tiny machzan in B'Shemesh, we're talking about acres and acres of vineyards. What? Yeah. So then what? Who's taken to court? Who's being blamed, so accused? The moicher. So the moicher has to take shevua. Why he has to take shevua is a good question. There will be, believe me, 90% of the shiur today will be about that. Okay? But he has to take shevua. Let's assume it's like moed b'miktzas. I'm not saying it is, but it's a shevua. Okay? Frank the Gemara again attacking Rabbi Bar Rav Huna. Rove understand Doma. What did Rove say? Ki Omer Sumchus Shema v'Shema. When did Sumchus apply his rule of Yachloiku? Make a nice split, 50-50, go home and drink your coffee, and that's it. Who says that? Sumchus. When? Only b'Shema v'Shema. Only on both sides, or maybe there's no clear chazaka. Such a non-exciting chazaka, there's no moitzim mechaveroi. Aval bori ubori loy. But when both sides are certain, and whoever holds the money is a bori, then Sumchus didn't apply his rule. Oh, Omar, lo Omar, Mishumachi Shava. Then I can understand, for whichever reason, which we still have to understand, I understand why splitting doesn't work, and then we have to find other solutions, and as we'll see later, the solution will be shevua. But I understand why we're out of the realm of Yachloiku. Fine, that much I know in Rava. El Rabbi Bar Rav Huna, the Omar, but according to Rabbi Bar Huna, the Omar, in. It's not in, it's in, yes. He said yes. Omar Sumchus afilu bori ubori. He wanted to dare and say yes. Sumchus says Yachloiku, even when both sides are bori. Amai shova moicher. Why should the seller swear bechlal? Why should he take shvua? Yachloiku mi baile. They should split. In other words, if this Mishnah is Sumchus through and through, which it is, then who cares whether it's bori or shema? Why did we have all these four cases to begin with? It's all the same, no? Sumchus, according to Rabbi Bar Huna, Sumchus believes that really, when it comes to any dispute, both are maybe bori and shema is different. Bori odif that I can hear. But when both sides are equal, lahavdil, like in this card game, you know, we have an ace and I have an ace, right? Lahavdil. Then bori, shema, v'shema are all the same. So why is it all of a sudden with bori and bori they have to take shevua? Why shevua? Yachloiku, right? Just like b'shema, you see it all the same, Rabbi Bar Huna, right? So how could you learn the Mishnah? Why is it a separate case of shevua? Answers the Gemara, Yeah, he should have. That's the necessary. That's the right thing to do. Answers the Gemara, and really this answer we'll only understand through the continuation of the Gemara. Answers Rabba Baravuna. Moide Sumchus would admit to Chachamim, hey Chadika Shvo Deoraisa Kedabin al Meimalakamon. Since later on we'll see that this Shvo is not a Rabbanon Dike solution, the Rabbanon established. It's a shvua d'oraisa. That's different. In other words, we all know Sumchus doesn't argue with the Torah. He argues with Chachamim and says, "I'm not so hot on Metzia Mechaber Levaraya. I have reservations, and even the Barabari, I don't go for that." But if there is a reason which we don't yet know, that's going to be hard work now to figure out. And that's the entire page today. It's not a difficult page. I'm saying it's a long path to find what is a shvua d'oraisa here. But there is a shvua d'oraisa. There is a reason here that when one says, you gave me the big field, I'm owed, I deserve the big field, and you gave me the small one, the reason why the seller has to swear and be nishba that he really owes only the small and not the big, it's a shvua d'oraisa. Oh, if there is for some reason from the through the left field, we're going to see a shvua d'oraisa coming, oh, of course. In this case, Sumchus keeps quiet and says, avadim not. I'm only talking about cases where there is no right. Let me give you a good example. What would be, it's a very silly question, it's just to accentuate what we're saying. What would Sumchus? Sumchus is the master of what? Yachloiku. Yeah, split it, split the land, split the evet, split the shifcha. Yeah, share and share alike. You know, maybe, I don't know, communists were inspired. Lahavdil, yeah. Sumchus Yachloiku. What would be if one of the sides of the shifcha, the one, whichever one, would bring Eidim? You'd bring two men, adult Jewish men, kosher mehadrin, the best Eidim money can buy. Yeah, the best Eidim in the world. And they would testify, we saw that the shifcha, there are two Jewish doctors in the delivery room, Jewish frum doctors, and they saw in the delivery room, and they looked at the watch and the clock, and they saw that she gave birth at time X, and we know that this time was either before or after the sale. They're supporting one side. What would Sumchus say? Obviously not. It's even a silly question. Why? Because Sumchus is only talking in a situation where nobody knows the truth, and the Torah doesn't voice its opinion, midoraisa. Then we say, I don't believe in Metzia Mechaber, I believe in Yechloiku. Here too, by shevua, if the Torah, for whichever reason, prescribes shevua, requires shevua, then Sumchus says, of course I'm not talking. And of course, in this case, whether Bori or Shema, I would say that the shevua should be taken, in this case in Bori, actually. Okay? And why do we have to take shevua? One second. That's exactly what we're going to learn now for an entire page. What is the shevua? Why is there a shevua when one person claims, I deserve a big piece of land, acres and acres, and you gave me, I don't know, half a kilometer of the land, and it's a different land. I'm owed your field. We spoke about your field in the Golan, big field, and you gave me a little field near Bet Shemesh, between Bet Shemesh and Soa. Half a kilometer, two different fields, and the person has to take shevua, the one sued, the nitbag. Why is that? That is going to be the next chapter. There is a line. There is weiter. Come on, as we see later. Now we're quoting, now we go to the main point. Now we quote the part of the Mishnah that tells you the case of shevua. Oilo beis avadim, echad godol ve'echad choton. The person, the seller, had two avadim, one big, strong, worth a lot of money. He can do anything you want around the house and in the field. The other one is a little shnukale, 10 years old, can do much less. And what do we say? Both sides are nishba. What are that? No, excuse me. Both sides are bori. Excuse me. Both sides are bori. The seller says, what? I sold you the small one. The buyer says, no, we spoke about the big one. So now the one who's being accused, the one who's claimed from, the nitba, in this case the seller, right? The seller has to take shevua that really the one that was promised, spoken about, sold actually, according to him, more than promised, was sold is really the small one. For the Gemara, there are three reasons why shevua should not take place. And all three reasons are going to follow us through the page. What? Oh, who's the muchzak over the money? Who's the muchzak? The seller. The seller. We want him to give us more, to give us the big eved. Imagine the following scenario: you're promised an eved. Yeah, don't be such a liberal. You can buy an eved and treat him nicely. Okay, and what I'm not translating what eved means, by the way. Nobody knows in YouTube what's eved. So now eved, and you're expecting the big robust guy to come to your house tomorrow, erev Pesach, to do your entire Pesach, expecting this gorilla of a man that you saw in the other person's house, and who comes to your house? A little shnukale, shpukale, 10 years old, who barely knows how to move around, right? So you're all angry, and you take him to BSD, and you say, I want that Eved, the big one from you, because that's what you promised, and you sold me the big one that's still in your house, not the little shnukale that I have to, wipe his nose. That's the case. So what do we say? Who has to take shevua? The one that is, and what is he? Moide. Is moide. Yeah, I did sell you something. I sold you a small one, the one that I brought to your house today. The big one is mine. Oh, so that who has to take? Who's muchzak in the big one? The seller. The seller. Seller has to take shevua. Okay. Back to Gemara, there are three reasons why he should not take shevua. Amai shava. Why should he swear? Why should he take an oath? Reason number one, why not? Mashetano lo hoidaloi. Mashoidaloi lo toanoi. Question number one, don't be confused here with moide b'miktzas. Even though the big evidence is worth 100,000 and the small one 50,000, so what? It's a completely different story. Why? He's completely koifer. Who? The seller disagrees completely and says the big one and never ever sold you zero from the big one. And what does he claim? The big one, right? In other words, he claims I'm owed 100,000 worth Eved, and he say no, that Eved of 100,000, zero from him. I had the 50. It's not moide b'miktzas. Why? Because it's a different Eved, right? Moide b'miktzas means what? When we argue about an entire 100,000, and what I the accused Khalila, I say 50 out of the 100 worth of cash, yeah, I owe you half or part. Then it's moide b'miktzas. Here it's not. This is chalk and cheese, apples and oranges. Yeah, in other words, the two separate things. Or as the Gemara says, you know what's the real expression? Americans in the English always argue about chalk and cheese and apples and oranges. You know what's the real expression of the Torah? It's in Shavuos daf mem lamet ches. It says over there, ton bechitim v'odol besoirim. It's the case of the Mishnah. I talked to you about wheat, and you admit barley. I say, Ellen, you sold me a ton of wheat, and you say, no, I sold you barley. Barley is worth less than wheat, yeah, less than wheat with the Ukraine today, always. And Lamaisa, if we speak about wheat and I say barley, it's not called moed b'miktzas because it's not the same item divided into two, which I'm chayv shvua d'oraisa. It's a completely different item. I'm completely koifer denying 100% and agreeing on a different item. Yeah, that's not called moed b'miktzas, and therefore shvua does not apply here. That's question number one. No questions from your side, please. Let's first start the Gemara. The question. The oid, another thing. Heilachu, question number two. I'll now tell you what's heilach. Let's see soon. Even according to, there is an opinion there in Shavuos, yeah, in Shavuos over there it says the tona bechitim v'adol besorim. If I claim from you wheat, hey, you should have given me wheat worth 100,000, and you say no, Kiva, I owe you barley worth 50,000. There is an opinion over there. We'll see in Amud base. There's a Tana there. Yeah, it's either Rabbi Meir, I think, or we'll see later. That says that's called moed b'miktzas. Even though they're different items, since at the end of the day, when you translate it to money, it's half the money. It's called the moed b'miktzas. There is such an opinion, right? However, you still shouldn't be nishba. Heilach, what's heilach? No, take. Very good. Heilach means there you are. That's heilach. Here, there you are. You serve it to the guy. Heilach is a case which we saw recently, and is also in daf beginning of the Masechta, daf Gimel Daled. What does it say over there? Let's say you claim Akiva, you owe me 100 shekels, and I say no, I owe you 50. No, so I should be nishba on the other 50. No, if I say yeah, here's 50, here's 50. Yeah, I owe you 50, and I very quick on the draw. I'm from the West. I quickly give you 50. Then I don't have to take shevua. Why? Because it's as if the 50 is a done deal, the case over, and now we have 100% kfira over the other 50. We're now only dealing with 150 over 2, and on that 50, I'm a complete koifer. And koifer b'koil doesn't have to take shvua. I don't think I have to repeat that. I'm just doing the extra set. We all know that. Midoraisa, who has to take shvua? The one who admits half the story. The one who denies the entire story, Midoraisa, doesn't have to take shvua, right? Heilach is like denying everything. You came to me and says, hey, you owe me 100. I owe you 50, and here it is. 50 is over. Huh. So now what are we arguing? Only on 50, right? Good. It's actually mechlokes over there, but some people hold, Heilach, I don't have to take shvua. Because now I'm a koifer b'koil, I'm a complete heretic, denying the entire 50. So now I'm denying 100% the seder. So, oh, wait, in the case of the avadim, what did I tell you? I didn't just make a nice picturesque story. If I say, listen, let's say I'm the seller, and I say, and I say, yeah, and I say, yeah, 1 second. What would be the following case? I'm the seller. I sold you an Eved Cotton, and Eved Cotton, where is he? In your house. That's called Helach. That's called Helach. I gave you the Eved. It's in your hands, right? So even if you say it's Moed B'Miktsas, it's Moed B'Miktsas of what? Of Helach. You claim that the big Eved that's in my house is owed to you, and I say no. Half of the big Eved, which is a small one, is in your house. So it's again Koifer B'Koil. Yeah, I gave you. The Eved is by you. Helach super. So why do you take shvua? There's no shvua by Helach. The third reason why shvua should not take place. Ein ishboin ala avodim. Ay. When one has a claim about avodim, shvua does not apply to avodim. Why is that? I'll tell you why. Again, it's a Gemara in Shavuos, Bava. When the Torah describes to you the concept of shvua, which we recently learned, what does the Torah say? Ki tenishel re'ehu lishmoir what? Kesef okelim. The Torah is chas v'shalom not stam, giving me examples. What's kesef okelim? Money or objects, movable objects, kelim. As opposed to what? Land. If I gave you a piece of land to look after, yeah, the Torah says kesef okelim v'gunam mibeis haish mibeis re'ehu, then v'nikra ba'al bais el ha'elohim. The nishpa has to take shvua over movable things, over metaltalim and money, not kalkois. Avadim are always compared to what? To kalkois. There are all kinds of reasons where we say sources, avadim are like a karka, right? Avadim are like a karka. And therefore, Eved is the same din of a piece of land. Just like a piece of land, shvua doesn't apply. You have a dispute over a piece of land, use your other halachic sources, Edim, Migo, Shtar, grandmother, whatever you want, but you cannot use shvua. The Torah just says shvua doesn't apply to kalkois, and so to avodim. We have Rabbi said, three reasons to question the Mishnah. Again, first of all, it could be that it's considered as not moed b'miktsas because I admit a whole different story. You claim I owe you a big eved, I say only small. Now, even if you say that it's considered moed b'miktsas, we make one big mush of the two avodim together, it's still called helach. I gave you one eved, so I'm koifer b'koil. We're only discussing the big eved, and that big eved I'm completely denying, and you completely claiming, right? What's the third reason? Avodim? There's no shvua by avodim. Three reasons why the Mishnah doesn't make sense. Machlokes Rav Shmuel how to answer. Amarav says Rav, betonoi domi. He claims money. It's not the claim of real avodim. It's the claim of money. Dmei eved godoil. Dmei eved koton. In other words, says Rashi, I tell you that there is a dmei eved godol, dmei eved koton, which means machlokes Rashi and Tosfos and the other Rishonim. Rashi says we're talking about money. There is no avodim exchanged here. It's not a buyer and seller. I gave you money to buy me a big eved, 100,000 shekels I gave you, and now where is it? And you say, no, only 50,000 I gave you. 50,000 what you gave me, and you know when I'll give it to you? In a month's time, when I get my next salary. So they're arguing about money, not about avodim. So that diffused everything. It's not avodim, it's money that the person got as a shliach. He's going to the avodim market, and he's going to buy an eved over there, and he was entrusted with 100,000. Says who? Says the giver. The one who's holding, the trustee, says, no, there's only 50,000. which is not halach. I'll give it to you next time I get my salary. So that's moed b'miktzas over money. Moed b'miktzas over money. Chayav shvua. That's easy. I don't even know what the chiddush is, by the way. Tosfos argues with Rashi, and Tosfos says, how can you say we're talking about a person who got money to purchase something? The Mishnah says, moicher and koine. Lokeach and moicher, right? We're talking about a buyer and seller. I can change the Mishnah. Says Tosfos, we're talking over here about a person who gave money already in order to buy an eved, but the kinyan wasn't yet done. The kinyan was going to be done by a shtar, and he got he got X amount of money in order to sell the eved, and at some point he wants to return and says, no, actually I don't want avadim. I'm an Abraham Lincoln fan. I'm not into buying an eved, or I don't need an eved anymore. My teenager started helping at home for a change, and now what? I don't need your eved, and I'm allowed to return. I'm allowed to revoke because there was no kinyan yet. Mishapara, I don't know. And what? How much should they return? 50. What? No, I gave you 100. I gave you 100. Return 100. He says, no, you gave me 50. That's it. They have an argument over the money, the purchase money of an eved without the purchase being done yet. So it's the same shaila. He says he gave me 100,000, and the recipient of the money says, no, I only got 50, and I'll give it to you next month. So it's money which you swear for. It's moed b'miktzas, and it's not halach. I'll give it to you in my next salary. I even write it on a paper. So that fits all the criteria, and that's a good, regular, classical, beautiful cheder style moed b'miktzas. To be honest, I don't know what's the chiddush according to Rav. I didn't see in the Rishonim. I'm admitting I have a question which I don't know the answer to. Or dmei sodik gdol, dmei sodik tana. Oh, if you remember, and you have to bear in mind, there are two cases of Mishnah, eved and sodik. We have to remember that same thing: the money of the small field over money of the big field. Okay. Shmuel doesn't like Rav's pshat. Maybe thinks it's not a chiddush. The toyanoi. The taina of the person is ksus eved godol, ksus eved koton. In other words, I want to buy a nice jacket or a nice shirt for my eved, and I say, you're the tailor. You sold me what you promised me. We spoke about. We bought verbally what a big suit, a big jacket, size extra large from the big fat eved, and you gave me this tiny thing, this extra small. Yeah, what's going on here? That's the argument. Okay. Or oimre stodik gdola, oimre stodik tana. The Amoraim, how do you call them? The sheaves, the bundles of wheat. I say gave me 100 sheaves of the sode, all bundled, all cut off, and he said only 50, 150. Now, and that's what the shevua should be about. Correct the Gemara, ksus. Well, does make sense. If you talk about ksus, if you talk about the garment, then we still have one of the issues. A garment is not an eved, so there's shevua. And it's not halach because he'll only give it to you next week or so. But still, right? When it comes to ksus, a big garment and a small garment is not one is not half of the other. You go to the store, right? I've been to the store and you have I don't know, pants, trousers. Yeah, there's extra large and there's small. One is not half of the other. There are two different items. So we still have the issue of chitim and sa'irim, right? They still talk cross waves, and it's not moed b'miktzas. I claim something that's one item, and you admit the other item. So that's not moed b'miktzas. Answers the Gemara, kedama rov pope, as we'll see later, Pope says, b'deyalfi. Soon we'll see what that means. Ochanami b'deyalfi. Yalfi is a very easy answer, or laifi. Laifi means melupaf, or here means when it's sewn together. Says the Ritva, it's very easy to speak about raw material, raw piece of fabric. I say my big eved needs a nice robe of 4 meters, to wrap himself up. He's a tall guy. He needs 4 meters. And you gave me 2 meters. So really, it is half. Yeah, they argue about one big, black piece of cloth, like a long shal. Yeah, he says 4 meters, and he says 2 meters. Very good. So the Maisa, excellent. So it meets all criteria. We're talking about not the eved, we're talking about the garment of the eved. Okay? So it's metaltalin, the shevua applies. It's not halach. I'm not giving it to you now. I'm giving it to you next week. And thirdly, it is moed b'miktzas. You say you gave me 4 meters of nice viscosa, and I'm telling you I gave you 2. Okay. Correct the Gemara. Kasha Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yoshia asks the question, midi ksus ktani? Eved ktani. I'm sorry. How can you play around with the words of the Mishnah? The Mishnah didn't speak about the garment. The Mishnah spoke about an eved. A garment has nothing to do with eved. Everyone wears garments. Him, his wife, his children, everyone gets dressed. So what does eved have to do with ksus? How can you play around with the words of the Mishnah? Therefore, Be'esha himself gives a different answer. Yeah, the taina was of the plaintiff of the toyen, eved biksusai the sade be'oimoreho, which means really there are two tvias. I told you I want to buy a big eved, well dressed, with a big frock, with a big garment, with a big robe, and what does the other one say? No, I owe you what? A small eved with a small frock, with a small lavush, yeah, and sade also, or a field with the Amoraim, and that's the argument. Okay, now why is the chayav shevua? How does that help? Gilgul shevua, Gilgul shevua. Why is it Gilgul shevua? Eved, you don't swear an eved. Avadim, there's no shevua by avadim. But since you owe me shevua for the garment, you say that what? You say that tiny garment, that's what you gave me? A small eved, a kleine eved with a kleine ksus, yeah, and a kleine mind, and a kleine shirt. I want big size eved, an extra large shirt. So because you can be nishba over the what? The garment, I can be megalgel, I can roll upon you like chain reaction, and if you have shvu on one item, the same claim I can already bring upon another shvua over the eved itself. Gilgul shvua. Where do we learn the Gilgul shvua from? Saito. Now, frag the Gemara v'akati. Wait. We're talking about two different garments. The garment worn by the big one is not at all the garment worn by the small one. One is not half of the other. It's two items. The akati. What's akati? Still. The akati. Ksus. When it comes to the ksus, the ksus, the small shirt, is not half of the big shirt. It's maybe half the size, but it's a completely different item. Each one has a different label, different, barcode. Yeah, it's a different thing. We're talking here about one eved that's wearing this, like, imagine flowing kind of piece of garment, 4 meters long, that's not cut and sewn. It's just not tailored, like a big scarf, shapeless item, a toga, right? So Mimela, I say I'm owed a big sturdy eved, a big guy, that can clean my house for Pesach, in 2 days. And what? And I was promised is going to wear this nice flowing thing of 8 meters, and he gave me this tiny eved that's wearing a 4 thing. And Mimela, Gilgul shvua applies. It is half. Avadim and echanami, there's no shvua for many reasons, but they come through the back door because it can be mechayiv shvua on the smaller item. Why did you give me a 4-meter scarf and not 8-meter scarf? And scarf are all the same in size. Why? Because you can nishba on that. Agav that, we roll over, we jump on the bandwagon by Gilgul, and you also nishba on the eved, in spite of all the many issues why you should not be nishba on an eved. So that could be a workable shot. I'll tell you a very, very small secret. We can go through a big how do you call it? A big roller coaster, but that will be the maskana. The Gemara will go back to that answer at the end of the journey. Yeah, the reason we has to be nishba is because it's basically moed b'miktzas. So there's your answer, Tzvi. Really, moed b'miktzas is the story here. Yeah, you're moed b'miktzas. If you say Akiva, you sold me an 8 meters fabric, little nishmas, my father. And I say what? 4 meters fabric, then I have to be nishba. Now you have tiny store, that's din Torah. Yeah. Now, to avoid your problem, I'll talk to you later. We'll talk to everyone later. There is a Tosfos to ask you a question. Leave that for later. Frag the Gemara. But now the Gemara is asking you a question. Kashel Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes has a question of what we just said. What's the chiddush? Now that the dust settled, what's the point of the chiddush of the Mishnah? Zoikikin also lashminan. What's the chiddush of this Mishnah? As I told you before in Rav, we don't have to know about moed b'miktzas. Moed b'miktzas is a very well-known concept for many Mishnahs and many other places. So what's the new chiddush here? Oh, it's not just moed b'miktzas. It's Gilgul shvua. Wow! If you nishba over the scarf, you can roll over. You can bring another shvua in. Bring it in another shvua over the eved, which you otherwise couldn't be nishba. Is that what it's coming to tell me? That's the big chiddush you're telling me? Tanina, It's a Mefurish Mishnah in Kiddush in Chavav Amud Aleph. Doiki ken anechosim she'en lehen achrayas, es anechosim sheyesh lehen achrayas, v'shov alein. Outright, black and white Mishnah in Kiddushin. Zoikekin. What's Zika? Connection. We connect. What's nechosim she'en lehem achrayas? Nechosim that have no liability. That is, a cup, a watch, a phone. Here today, gone tomorrow. Things that disappear quickly are mitaltalin. So those things are chayev shevua. They're kesef okelim. If somebody owes me 2 items, I have 2 claims against one person. One, you owe me watch, you owe me money, you owe me a phone, you owe me a computer. I gave it to tikkun, whatever. Besides that, I also claim that you owe me a piece of land. How's a piece of land called? Yesh lehen achrayas. Yeah, it's called what? Even in English, real estate. It's real estate. Yeah. In other words, it's something that never moves around. You can steal a piece of land as the machlokes in Bava Kama. Piece of land will always be there. But a piece of land is something you're not chayav shevua. Says the Mishnah in Kiddushin, if you have 2 claims, one on metaltalin, one on karka, you can take, and since you have to be nishba metaltalin, I can quickly after that tell you, you also have to, in the same court case, to be nishba over the karka. So we know it already from the Mishnah. Why does the Mishnah over here have to start alluding stories? Eved, with a shal, with a scarf, with the thing. It's a Mefurish Mishnah in Kiddushin. So why is the Mishnah over here wasting its time, giving me all kinds of hints and allusions to a Mefurish Mishnah in Kiddushin already? Doesn't make sense that that's what the Mishnah is coming to tell me, that that's the big news of the Mishnah. Elomar of Sheshes. And now we start a whole different journey. So back to square one. Let's just summarize where we are. Yeah, look in the maps. You are here. We are now back to square one. Back to square one means square one had 3 issues. Assuming that we're not talking about Gilgul Shvua. It's not a Chiddush. To tell me, you nishba over a scarf, chaparine, be nishba on the Eved too, even though Eved is not Mechayiv Yeshvua, because Eved is like land. Leave that alone. That's not accepted. So, we're talking about only 2 items here. Big Eved versus small Eved, right? Big bear, small bear, big Eved, small Eved. Then we had 3 issues with that. How can be nishba? Issue number 1, we say what? First of all, it's not moed b'miktzas. I completely agree that I owe you the small one, and I completely koifer b'kol in everything you claim that I owe you the big one. The big one is going to clean my house for Pesach, and it's mine, and never mention it at all, right? That complete kfira. Now, even if you call it moed b'miktzas, it's halach, because we say the small eved, which is, let's say, called half of the big eved, nagid, is in the house of who? Of the buyer. That's halach. Yeah, it's not something I'll give you next week or tomorrow. It's shown already by you. Thirdly, and on top of everything, shevua avadim, that's milk and meat together. That's shatnez. There's no shevua by avadim. Kesef okelim, lapuki avadim. There are 3 things you don't take shevua on. Karka, it's important to know already now. Karka, piece of land. Avadim, which are always the sidekick, the body of karka, and shtoris. That's how you owe me a shtar, you owe me a check. You told me you're selling me a check. Remember checks before bank transfer? There was a thing called checks. Yeah, bank checks. Yeah, you owe me a check. You owe me a shtar. You owe me something. And you say no. And I say half. Then what? Then there's no shvua by shtoris. Why? It's actually machloikas in there in Bava Kama, but that's what some people say. And those 3 items, shvua doesn't apply to. You have to find other solutions. So right now we're stuck. We're in trouble deep. Why? Because basically the Mishnah is telling me big Eved versus small Eved requires shvua. Which shvua comes to your mind? Which shvua? No shvua by avadim. And it's not even clear that it's moed b'miktzas. So we're stuck. Answers the Gemara. Elam of Sheshes. Therefore, of Sheshes comes the whole new pshat. Homani. You know who's the author of our Mishnah? Rabbi Meir. It's Rabbi Meir. The Omar avda kimetaltalin dami. Oh, okay. He believes Eved is like metaltalin, which means when you learn Eved and, let me surprise you, even Karka. Wow. Rabbi Meir believes that both Avodim and Karkois, Shvua applies to. Why? Because, what did I tell you? What's the source in the Torah that Shvua doesn't apply to Avodim and Karkois? It says in the Torah about Shvua, Kesef Okelim. Now, if you learn the Sugi over there, we're not going to go into it. There are 2 ways to learn Kesef Okelim. There's Klal Uprat Uklal, or Ribui Miut Veribui, right? Now, if you mema'et, if you go by klal uprat uklal, then only prat, you only might one thing, and that is shtoris. Shtoris, you don't be nishba. But avadim and kalkois are included in shevua. So that's what Rebbe believes. I'm not going now to klal upat, Rebbe miut. I don't want to confuse you. It's a sugya there. Look into the Kamakuf, you design, I think. And over that, but Lamaise, Rebbe Meir is of the opinion, kalkois even, and avadim, shevua applies to them. Finished. Good. Fine. Right. So our Mishnah follows Rabbi Meir. It's like, good, Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir, right? Mishnah Rabbi Meir, and he believes avadim, shevua applies to them. Because that's how we learn the drasha over there in Parshas Mishpatim and Kesef Okelim. Ready the Gemara, that's 1 out of 3. Hey, don't get away with murder over here. We still have 2 more questions. Vakati, still, it's still not called Moed B'Miktas. Very nice, Nishman Karka and Avadim. Let's say, and I'm not joking by the way, if I say you sold me half an Eved, you can do that. You sold me an entire Eved. You sold me your Eved. You have an Eved, you sold me. And you say, no, I sold you half an Eved, meaning, comes in the cut Eved, I sold you from Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Okay. That could be, right? If you talk about regular, nice, classical, symmetrical, Moed B'Miktas, then Eved is like money. Shvu applies. Moed B'Miktas, good. That's not the case over here. The case over here, no. Because they're talking cross currents. How do you say? Cross conversation, yeah? In Hebrew, it's called deaf's conversation, conversation of the deaf. He's talking about one thing and he's talking about the other. In other words, I'm talking about what? That I owe you nothing of the big one, right? And when you don't claim, is what I say, I already gave you the small one. That's not called Moed B'Miktas. That's like wheat and barley. That's like apples and oranges. It's not Moed B'Miktas. That's Mishnah in Shavuos, Lamed Ches, I'm sorry. Answers the Gemara. Here comes to the rescue another out-of-the-box opinion. Savar lo Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel says what? Our Mishnah follows Rabban Gamliel, and that makes everything work right. Which Rabban Gamliel? The Tanan. It's a Mishnah in Shavuos Lamed Ches Amud Beis. Tom lechitim v'odesoirim. I claim to you, hey Rabbi, you sold me, you promised, and not just promised. It was mamish a kinyan over what? You owe me a ton of wheat. Let's assume wheat is worth more than barley. I don't know about today, but yeah, wheat classically is worth more than barley. Because why? Barley classically was always animal fodder. It was machal be'ema. That's what the soita gives it. The soita is like a be'ema. Ta'anochitim, you owe me. We spoke about wheat. Rachmana litzlon, you make me see red. I open the box. What is there? Soirim. Soirim? You think him to a barley diet? I'm a behema. And he says, yeah, I owe you soirim. We spoke about soirim. Swear. Why? Binishba. Because chitim are worth 100,000 and soirim 70,000. Doesn't have to be half, yeah? So binishba, that you don't, binishba, you moide b'miktas, potu. Says the Mishnah, no, it's potu. It's not called moide b'miktas. Moide b'miktas means it's all the same item, and I moide half the item, $100,000, you owe me 70,000. A big piece of yellow cheese, you moide half the yellow cheese. But chitim soirim physically are not half of chitim. They're completely different kind of produce, right? So there's no moide b'miktas shvua. Rabban Gamliel comes to the rescue. Mechayev. Rabban Gamliel mechayev. Rabban Gamliel says no. We undress it from its gashmiasdike form of chitim and soirim, and we look at the value. We translate everything into money, like some people do. In other words, when push comes to shove, what's the value of chitim? 100. Let's say soirim, I don't know the prices, are 70. So lamaisa, it boils down to cash, right? And it is called moide b'miktas. We can philosophize a lot about it. So our Mishnah is on crutches. Mitzad avadim being nishba, we all look Rabbi Meir, which applies to avadim. Mitzad moide b'miktas, we believe Rabbi Gamliel, that holds what? That holds that even though the items are different, big Eved, Abdul, and small Eved Mahmud, they're not the same people, but the value is half. Yeah, the small Eved is worth 50,000 shekels, the big 100,000. He views that, we are like Rabban Gamliel, that does view that as moed b'miktas. So 2 out of 3 options, we have survived. Third question, akati, still, helachu, it's still a helach. Why? Because I'm not arguing and admit to half and telling you the half that I owe you, I'll pay you next month with my next salary. No, the half that I owe you, i.e. the small Eved, is in your house. Give it already. Here it is. Take it. No, and in such a case, we say shvua doesn't apply. Omarove. So now we have to make a nukimta. Avda dekota liyode lo leinu. We're talking about an eved that he cut off his hand. Yeah, the eved is a cut off hand. The guy cut off his hand lo leinu. The sode shachofer beboirus shichon meoiros. And the sode that we talk about, there's always sode or eved. It's a sode that was destroyed because the person who, I think we're talking about the person who gave it, but I'm not sure. Is Lamaise, it doesn't matter who did it, as far as I know. The sode and is full of pits and caves. It's a dysfunctional field. You can't do anything over there. It's not arable, not workable, and therefore what? If it's a dysfunctional an eved without hands cannot do much. You know, he's not modeling his face to the magazine. Yeah, he's an eved, has to work with his hands. And what about the karka? Is a dysfunctional karka? So now let's say, you gave me a dysfunctional karka. You gave me dysfunctional eved. So what do you say? Hey, wait a second. The big eved, I don't owe you. I owe you the small eved. Oh, the small eved cut off his hand. I'm so sorry. I'll give you another eved, or it's worth another time. What was the whole time? The eved is there. But if the eved cut off his hand for whichever reason, the iskilu is not there. It's dysfunctional, right? Or the land iskilu not there. It's not a functional land. It's not workable land. And therefore, when I say yes, I owe you a small one, a small eved, a small land, I'm not saying I owe you and here it is in your house, because an eved in your house with a cut off hand is it's as if it's not there. I admit that what? I'll give you another eved instead, a small one. I'll give you the value of the small eved. Oh, that's called Medimiktas without Halach. It's not yet by you. I'll give it to you next time I make some money. I owe you 50,000, which I'll give you eventually, because the eved I gave you now is not even worth that. It's kilo, I didn't give it to you. It's gone. It's out the window. It's with a cut off hand. And therefore, Lemaisa, we have answered, we ticked all three boxes. Again, let's summarize. We had three issues why not. The shiur is over almost. Okay, we'll summarize now. Again, so right now, what do we want to say? We have an issue here of a person, two people arguing about two. It's not b'mikra. We talk about avadim and karkois. Avadim and karkois are hand in hand. We say avadim are like a karka. And therefore what? There are three issues here when the Mishnah told me. When one person says, I sold you a small land, and here it is, or a small eved, here, it's right there. And the other person is furious and says, the bori, you promised a big one, not just promised, you sold me by kesef, by shtar, by something chazaka, you sold me a big one, not a small one, you're lying. Yeah, now give me a small one. So we say that the person has to be nishba as moide b'miktzas. What? Which moide b'miktzas? Which moide b'miktzas comes to your mind? Three issues. I'm changing the order. First of all, eved and karka shvua doesn't apply. It's fine, right? I took it from the end. Yeah. So what are you talking about? What was the other problem? Yeah, you called it moed b'miktzas. It's not called b'miktzas. He's not admitting half an eved. I didn't say yes. I sold you the eved for Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I did not sell you the eved, and I sold you a different eved. That's not moed b'miktzas. It's chalk and cheese. It's chitim and And thirdly, it's halach. Yeah. I gave you the eved. You're not nishba on a moed b'miktzas that's too eager to give the half that he owes. What did we answer? We had to create a whole new structure here, all cosmetic surgery to the Mishnah. The cosmetic surgery. First of all, we hold like Rabbi Meir that believes that shevua applies to avadim. We hold like Rabban Gamliel that holds that two different items is called moed b'miktzas, because we don't care about the items, we care about the value. Yeah, when push comes to shove, we talk money time, bottom line. Yeah, the chitim are worth 100, the sorim 70, so we're arguing about 30. Even I know that. Yeah, so binishba. Oh, so we believe it all boils down to value. Big eved, small eved, it's a question of value. What about halach? There's no halach, because the evidence in his house, yeah, was given to him with the hand cut off. It's not called that I gave you the eved. Even the eved that I admit I owe you and bring you another eved in a month or so, in a day or two. Depends what good customer service he gives, yeah? But the current eved, it's not called it was given to him because it doesn't have a hand, lolly. Or the land is full of holes, it's not a good land, and therefore the Mishnah works right. And therefore, because of these three factors, the Mishnah does tell me that there's shevua that applies. However, tomorrow we'll see a lot of issues. Tomorrow's topic will be avadim and karkois, yeah? Avadim and karkois, do we compare eved to karka? Is evident, do eved and karka have shevua? and other special features, the avadim and karkois, that will be Metzia Hashem. What's tomorrow? Tuesday. Metzia Hashem. Thank you very much. Atzlocho Rabba B'chol Inyonim. Thank you very much to everybody in Avos Shalom. Anytime. YouTube, Kol Lashon. Thank you. Atzlocho V'rocho.